calf floats to the surface of the moray firth. It is small, gray, still warm. It did not drown. It did not starve. Something held it beneath the water again and again until it stopped moving and then kept it there longer. The marks on its body are not the marks of a predator. They are the marks of something that knew exactly what it was doing and did not stop when it could have. For a long time, no one wanted to say what species made those marks, because the animal responsible was not a shark. It was a dolphin. Most people carry the same image of the dolphin: smiling, playful, gentle enough to trust near children. An animal so intelligent, so social, so emotionally advanced that it seems almost human beneath the water. That image is not false. It is simply incomplete. And the missing part of it is the part researchers spent decades trying not to publish. In the early 1990s, marine biologists studying bottlenose dolphins along the coast of Scotland and Virginia began finding the bodies of harbor porpoises washing ashore with a strange, repeating pattern of injuries. Internal trauma, broken ribs, tail strikes so violent they had ruptured organs. At first, the assumption was predation. A shark perhaps, or a boat strike. But the wounds didn't match either. They matched something else, something researchers were reluctant to name because it did not fit the story dolphins had been given. The porpoises had not been eaten. They had been beaten to death. And the animals responsible left teeth marks that could only belong to one species. Here is what most people assume. Violence in nature exists for a reason: to eat, to defend territory, to survive. Nature, in the popular imagination, is efficient. Cruel, perhaps, but never wasteful. That assumption collapses the moment you study dolphin behavior closely enough. Because bottlenose dolphins do not eat porpoises. They gain no food from the encounter. No territory, no mate, no resource of any measurable kind. They simply kill them and then swim away. By the early 2000s, the porpoise killings were no longer an anomaly. They were a documented pattern observed independently on 2 continents, involving multiple dolphin populations that had never had contact with one another. The behavior had a name now: porpicide, and the more researchers studied it, the stranger it became. The attacks were not random outbursts. They followed a structure, a kind of grim choreography. Dolphins would isolate a porpoise from open water, take turns ramming it with their beaks and flukes, and prolong the assault for as long as an hour. Necropsies later showed injuries consistent with repeated, deliberate blunt trauma, not the fast, efficient kill of a predator securing a meal. This was not hunting. This was something closer to what humans, uncomfortably, might recognize in ourselves. And then researchers found something worse. The same behavior, the same prolonged, purposeless violence was being directed at another target: dolphin calves, their own species. Sometimes their own offspring's peers. Infanticide among bottlenose dolphins is now considered by multiple long-term study populations to be a recurring behavior, not a rare aberration. Adult males, sometimes in coalitions of 2 or 3, have been documented killing calves not their own, using the same battering technique seen in the porpoise attacks. The theory that eventually gained the most support was not comforting. Killing the calf of a female removes her nursing bond. Removing that bond returns her to fertility faster. The violence, in other words, may serve a reproductive strategy. But that explanation only accounts for some of it. It does not explain the porpoises. It does not explain why the killing sometimes continues long after any strategic purpose has been served. Why some attacks seem to escalate past what survival or sex or hierarchy could ever require. Here is where the story becomes something closer to a psychological investigation than a nature documentary. Because the dolphin brain is not a simple one. It is large, densely folded, capable of self-recognition in a mirror, a trait shared with almost no other species on Earth. Dolphins pass on cultural traditions between generations. They use tools. They call each other by name, using signature whistles unique to every individual. And they use those names to summon specific companions from a distance. This is not the brain of a simple stimulus response animal. This is a brain built for society, for memory, for relationships that last decades. And it is that same brain that organizes coalitions of males to hunt down and beat a newborn to death. The uncomfortable question researchers eventually had to sit with was this. What if intelligence does not make violence less likely? What if, in some species, intelligence makes violence more organized, more deliberate, more strategic, more capable of being sustained past the point any simple animal would stop? There is a term some behavioral scientists have used cautiously when discussing this: surplus aggression. Violence that exceeds any functional requirement. Violence that continues after the goal, territory, food, reproduction has already been achieved. It is not unique to dolphins. It appears in different forms, in orcas that toss live seals into the air for what looks like practice, in chimpanzees that raid neighboring troops not for food, but seemingly to eliminate rivals before they grow strong, in house cats that continue tormenting prey long after the kill would have been efficient. And it appears unmistakably in us. For most of the 20th century, humans built a psychological wall between nature and cruelty. Animals killed to survive. Humans, alone, killed for reasons that went beyond survival. For power, for pleasure, for something darker than hunger. That wall was comforting. It let us believe cruelty was a uniquely human invention, a flaw of civilization, not a biology. Dolphins dismantled that wall quietly, in coastal waters, without asking permission. Because what researchers observed in Porpicide and Infanticide was not confusion, and not simple instinct misfiring. It was coordination, patience, repetition, behavior that, in any other species with this level of cognitive complexity, we might be forced to call intent. We do not like extending that word to animals we've decided are gentle. We like it even less when the animal in question has spent 60 years starring in films where it saves drowning children. Perhaps the discomfort was never really about dolphins. Perhaps it was about the story we told ourselves before we knew better. A story where intelligence and gentleness were the same thing. Where a creature smart enough to recognize itself in a mirror must also be too enlightened for cruelty. The ocean never promised that. It only produced a mind complex enough to organize violence the way it organizes friendship, memory, and play. Using the same neurons, the same social bonds, the same capacity for coordination that lets two dolphins call each other by name across open water. Somewhere beneath the surface, right now, a group of adult males may be moving with purpose toward a lone calf. Not out of hunger, not out of instinct gone wrong, but because their minds are sophisticated enough to plan it, patient enough to sustain it, and social enough to do it together. And if that unsettles you, if some part of you wants to look away from an animal you once trusted completely, perhaps that discomfort is the most honest response there is. Because the smile was never an expression. It was just the shape of the jaw,